car prices in general have become quite ridiculous, and spending what used to be money to buy you an entry level car, let's say 5 to 7 lakh rupees in terms of price, it doesn't seem all that value for money anymore. Most people are switching to spending upwards of 10 lakh rupees for their new car, which means that everything from a Sonnet to a Creta to a Harrier could potentially be someone's first car, the space that you would have reserved for a Maruti 800 or a Nano or a Santro or something like that. And the reason for that, in no small part, is loans and their interest rates and how they sort of change your expectation or assumption of how budgets work. Simple example. If I were to buy a mid-range model of a Maruti Alto today, I put down, let's say, 1 lakh rupees as the down payment. I take a tenure of 5 years.
Sure.
Interest rate of roughly 9%. I think my EMI would work out to be about 10,000 rupees per month. Let's say I keep everything the exact same and I move to a Baleno, maybe one below top Baleno. The premium over there will be 17,000 rupees, the monthly EMI that I'm paying. Obviously, that's a big jump right there.
Premium is 7,000 rupees, but yeah.
A premium overall, I'm saying 17,000 versus 10,000. And I can change that. Obviously, the gap over there is very big, but I can change that by maybe going for a slightly lower variant of the Baleno. I can increase my loan tenure from 5 to 7 years. Obviously, the amount of money that I'll land up spending at the end of that loan period will be much bigger. But the per month expenditure for me is going to be very close to what an Alto would have costed me. And that changes your equation, because in theory, what you're doing is you're upgrading like a segment or two, paying roughly the same amount of money per month, and that is enabling you to upgrade in advance. So you could possibly hang on to this car for longer rather than holding on to an Alto for 2 to 3 years. You hang on to this for maybe 5, 6, 7 years, upgrade in advance, live with the car a little bit longer, and then again make a similar sort of large jump to the segment above and above that.
Yeah.
And this equation has also led to people getting a lot more aspirational, not with just the kind of car that they're buying, but the brands that they come for. And that is where used luxury cars have become a brand new sort of temptation. Not brand new temptation, but a lot more popular temptation for more people now.
See, they have become, and that is because these entry-level cars, they kind of struggle to justify their value proposition because everything feels like it's built to a cost. Whether you talk about design, whether you talk about safety, which has become paramount, right? Whether you talk about the features that are on offer. All of this, especially when you've got access to easy finance, is not something you'd be willing to put up with. The used luxury car space, I think, is my favorite time pass on the internet.
Guilty, yeah.
Right? And this is across budgets. Up to 5 lakh rupees, 6 lakh rupees, you can get 5 series, you can get an E-class, right? You move up to 10 to 15 lakh rupees, you can possibly get a decade-old 3 series. You could get, again, you could get C-classes, you can get A4s for that money.
Meaning that the 4 to 5 lakh rupee luxury car you're talking about is significantly older than that.
Probably 15 years.
North of that, yeah.
Yeah, right. And if you move up to 15, 20 lakh rupees, then really the big guns start coming in. You could look at possibly SUVs like the Q5, the X3, right? So on and so forth. Then there's my favorite bit of the used car market, right? For 25 lakh rupees, what would you buy brand new if you wanted performance?
Volkswagen Virtus, Seltos Turbo Petrol, Creta Turbo
What
Petrol.
if you can buy a 5-liter supercharged V8 in a Jag XFR?
Yeah.
Say for if you had 15-20 lakh rupees to spare, what kind of diesel would you buy? What diesel SUV would you buy?
Sonnet.
What if I tell you you can get a 3-liter X3 for that kind of money, right?
Yeah.
If you had 8 lakh rupees and you wanted something sporty, what would you buy?
A Swift.
You can buy a E90 330i for that money, rear wheel drive, straight 6 engine, all is fun. And for 3 lakh rupees, there's no new car you can buy.
Yeah, not anymore.
But you can buy an S-Class if you're brave enough.
Yeah, that runs on hopes and dreams instead of its air suspension.
And tears, mostly tears.
Yeah.
But by and large, the point I'm trying to make here is based on your budget, based on the risk you're willing to take, and based on how much hope, dream and ambition you have, these used luxury cars have become really, really accessible.
I think that there are three categorizations also in a way of the people who would be looking at these used luxury cars. The first is at that entry level space, right? 4 to 5 lakh rupees. These are very polar opposites, I feel. One is the kind of buyer who's very specific that I want this exact car for whatever reason. Could be like a very old E65 series, but because of the design or because he wants to put a fake M badge on it or something, he's going to get that because he can pretend he's driving a V8, a V10 rather. And then on the opposite side is somebody who's looking at an entry level car, but then saw that I can get a Mercedes BMW, but is completely aloof to the fact that we're going to get into the facts that we're going to get into in terms of ownership experience, and luxury cars are the same to buy as they are to own. And then there's the third category, like you had mentioned, in that 15 to 25 lakh rupee space, where there is a upgrade, no doubt about it. There is a certain amount of risk, obviously, but it feels like slightly more calculated a risk than the super cheap luxury cars that we have available.
Sure. Let's break this down. Say if I were to buy a used luxury car today, let's start with the positives. The first one obviously is the brand value that you get with a car like that. So if you land yourself a BMW, Audi, Porsches are also surprisingly affordable these days. Uh, Jaguars, right? All of these brands are kind of the brands you grew up aspiring for,
Yeah.
right? And they're suddenly within reach. So there is a bit of temptation, and there is this sense of pride in saying, I drive a BMW, I drive a Mercedes, I drive an Audi, as opposed to saying, I drive
A Maruti, Hyundai, Tata Mahindra, whatever it is, right? I think there is also the phenomenon of the garage queen. There are people who literally buy a car to park in their garage, and as long as it has a badge on them, they don't even care if it's running or not because they don't intend to use that car so much in the first place. So they're figuring, if I'm going to fill in my parking spot, let me just buy something that's going to be looking super fancy. So hypothetically, people will assume that I've got a luxury car because that is the element of brand to it. Like you said, it's when you say what you drive, it's even the most uninterested in cars person knows that a Mercedes Benz or BMW has greater value than some other mass market brand. And for that reason, people will be looking at these super affordable luxury cars. But I feel like the other reason why many people will be looking at luxury cars is the driving experience that you get with them. Because they're engineered to, I'd say, a more discerning standard in many cases, where they're supposed to be driving at much higher speeds, dealing with handling dynamics that are a lot more demanding. They're tested to standards that are a lot more enthusiast focused in many cases. That is also one set of buyer who will be gravitating towards these cars, and that is a major pull as to why you would want to buy a luxury brand in the first place.
Sure. The drive experience, you look at the vehicles that are, say, available up to 15 lakh, right? If you wanted to experience a V6 petrol, a straight 6 petrol, or a V6 diesel, right? You'd have to spend exorbitant money today to try and just experience it or own one of those,
In
right?
the new car market, for
In the
sure.
new car market. But in the used car market, if you look at, say, an E350D sedan, right, or the E90 330i, for example, stuff like this lets you tell people, hey, I've owned a V6 in my life, I've owned a V8 in some cases, and this experience, because they belong to the olden era, it's not really tainted and tempered by emissions,
Yeah,
by sound regulations,
less so.
less so. And that joy of driving is somehow maintained, right? Also, there's this factor of nostalgia that kicks in. You've grown up looking at these cars and wanting, aspiring, and they are within reach, and they are incidentally also engaging to drive, which is why I feel drive experience, like I said, is a very, very strong point. And these engine formats, which are sadly dying out, is something that you can only experience if you buy a used luxury car. And finally, this is a big point. Even though these cars are 10 odd years old, they're not particularly unsafe in terms of safety,
Oh yeah,
right?
definitely.
Because they were like, they're engineered to global standards. They put through serious crash tests even back in the day,
Yep.
right? So, say, even if you pick a 2015 Audi A4 that's gone through Euro NCAP of that time, it's still tested frontal offset at what, 64 kilometers per hour. It is tested for a side pole impact
At a higher speed
at a
than
higher
what
speed than what
Bharat
global
NCAP
NCAP
does
does.
today. Yep.
So, Bharat, sorry.
Yeah, the same standard.
And pedestrian safety has also been accounted for.
Similar, you also have, I think, the full frontal crash test that is carried out, which is not done at all in global NCAP or Bharat NCAP, is done at 50 kilometers per hour. And full frontal versus frontal offset, the results you get are significantly different.
Plus, just because it's an old car, right, the basics of safety are absolutely not skipped out on. In terms of tech, everything's there. You've got your side and curtain airbags, you've got your traction control, you've got child seat mounts, the works. Anything that a 10 lakh rupee car of today has, a 50 lakh rupee car from 10 years ago had, right? Where you will be compromising is in terms of the touch and feel. Probably the infotainment experience is going to be a little dated, but that is not as much of a deal breaker, at least for me, right? As long as mechanically the vehicle is sorted.
Touch and feel, I don't think will be one area where the gap will be so apparent, because that car was sitting at, because if you're comparing to what the buyer is looking at in the new car market versus where that car was originally in the new car market, right? An A4, which is a 35-40 lakh rupee car, new, and let's say it depreciates and you're buying it for 20-ish lakh. In that space, an A4 is not going to be that much worse on quality compared to what a new mass market brand is going to be offering. That is the sort of, that's the kind of bargaining you do. Tech, for sure. The touchscreen infotainment system, maybe even ADAS, those kind of systems may not be as advanced as what the new car is going to be getting you without the badge value.
Now, also, let's remember that most of these cars uh, are really sensitive to how they've been cared for, right? So, if they have not seen care, interior quality, fit and finish kind of deteriorates over time, and that is something that is specific car to car. And I think this is a really nice segue to figure out what really are the cons of trying to buy a huge luxury vehicle. And the first of all is whatever you save trying to buy the car, right? Paisa. It, you might really end up blowing through it when you're trying to keep it running.
This is, I think, the most fundamental point as to why we say two things, right? One is when you were talking about the XFR or the inline six availability. You, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And you cannot be looking at these through rose tinted glasses, because that is sort of the whole reason why we're having this discussion in the first place. Because a lot of the things that we're going to tell you right now will be obvious to many people. For some people, it will come as a shock. I'll give you one example, right? I think I've told you this already. When my neighbor was looking to buy his new car, he had an old Zen. His options to me, Tushar, I am considering between the Maruti Suzuki Baleno, the Honda Jazz, and the BMW 3 Series.
Yeah, where
I was
did
like,
that come
I
from?
was like, what do my ears need cleaning? What did I hear that right? BMW 3 Series. Like, yeah, I'm getting a used 3 Series in this price. Should I look at it? And for him, it didn't even strike it as a possibility. And this is the most fundamental point people need to understand. A 50, 60, 70 lakh rupee car can depreciate to 10, 15 lakh, but it is still very much a 70 lakh rupee car to maintain. These are cars that were either imported or locally assembled at most in India. None of them are completely local in India, right? They'll be using certain parts, they'll be localizing to a large extent. For the most part, everything comes in assembly and it's imported otherwise. This also goes for their parts and components that are used. This also goes for the kind of standards that they maintain, right? What could be fixed with a slight repair job will be considered a direct replacement by dealer standard or service standard, because that is what they go by. That if some one sensor goes and you've got three associated sensors, they'll tell you to replace all four in the same go. These are the kind of reasons why you will see that service expenditures with these cars, even in the entry level, are quite high. Let's take, for example, the BMW 2 Series, that kind of segment, or even a BMW X1. I think the first service on one of these cars would be somewhere around 15 to 20-ish thousand. You move to the second service, it'll go up to 30, 35,000. The third service will be hitting 45, 50,000. And then that number keeps jumping up and up, because obviously as you go through the miles, the amount of things that needs to be done to these cars is going to be high. And yes, you do get service packages up to, I think they're, how much would one of these cost, a service package?
It depends on the kind of car you buy and the tenure of the package as well. And it varies from brand to brand as well. And there's a separate debate whether you should be buying a service pack from the manufacturer or not. But by and large, these service packs are designed to ensure that the vehicle is always serviced at the authorized service center and no kind of spurious parts, etc., are put in. The flip side to this, like you said, is a 50 lakh rupee car, no matter when you buy it, is still a 50 lakh rupee car. My father used to very often say कि free में हाथी दिया इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि घर ले आओ, right? Because feeding that hathi or taking care of that hathi really takes time. And because most of these cars will be out of their warranty by the time you buy it, that is a risk that you have to be willing to take. And let's face it, if a brand new 2 Series or an X1, like you said, the cost over 5-6 years to maintain at BMW authorized service center is a lakh,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Is around a lakh. You have the maths out for me here. So which averages out to at least 20-25,000 per year over, right? And a luxury car that you've bought for, say, for example, 5-6 lakh rupees, or maybe even 10 lakh rupees, you will never be spending 25,000 rupees per year on trying to service it. First and foremost, you will be covered by warranty, and basic service for a Maruti, a Toyota, a Honda costs, it's often in 4 digits.
Yeah, like if you were spending 25 to 30,000 rupees on a mass market brand, irrespective of what, Volkswagen, Honda, Toyota, it could be, that's usually one of their major services. Like a full suspension replacement on a 10 to 12 lakh rupee hatchback will cost you 25 to 27,000 rupees with original parts and labor included. That's not the case over here. That's like your baseline being set. And let's not forget, these are very basic services we're talking about. Engine oil, oil filter, AC filter, intake filter, all those kind of things. These are very basic things. That's not really where the expenditures kick in as much. It's when the replacement part comes in, often things that are not necessarily covered, even if you do have a service package to protect you.
Sure. See, you brought the point up about suspension overall as an example, right? Say a 2015 F33 series. I know a friend who's paid in 6 digits to have suspension replaced.
Not surprising.
And this is obviously a German car, a low car. The suspension takes a beating on Indian roads. Would you be willing to spend 6 digits trying to replace a suspension, right? Granted, the entire set on a vehicle that is already 10 years old, something that you've bought for maybe 10-12 lakh rupees. Would you be willing to spend 10 or 15% of the car's value on just trying to fix it? And then there's the bigger question of part availability. Sure, for your basic, and I'm using the word basic slightly loosely here, say the 320Ds, the 520Ds, the 320Is, right? All the usual diesel petrol sedans, the running parts, as they say, are quite easily available, or established aftermarket replacement parts are available. So you're never going to be short on parts like your plugs, your filters. Obviously, oil is never going to be an issue. Brake pads are never going to be an issue. But these cars are also quite electronically complex,
Yeah.
right? And there are a lot of sensors, there's a lot of wiring, there are a lot of body control modules, and you don't know what can go wrong at what point.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter how well the car is kept. And a electronic glitch is something that no one can predict at any point in time.
This also links to something we've obviously mentioned in different discussions, that none of these luxury cars are tailor-made for India. They're not built for these kind of conditions. They expect different air quality, different humidity levels, different fuel quality, different temperatures. They're not going to be so thorough in terms of their focus for surviving in our conditions or thriving in them at the very least. Which means that, yes, when you buy that luxury car used, it could have costed you 15 to 20 lakh rupees. But you can rack up a bill that will cross that number in terms of just getting the car to running condition. And yes, there is that option that if you were to buy one of these used luxury cars, you go to a non-authorized service center. They can offer you options. Like, let's say you went to Audi and they tell you that your A6's transmission needs a full replacement and it costs 4, 5, 6 lakh rupees. And then somebody will, on the unorganized sector, will tell you that you don't need to change the entire transmission. You just need to change this pulley here, this little gear here, this rivet here, that's all. It's still a gamble. They're telling you that it could theoretically work. Maybe they'll say that you don't drive your car so much anyway, why do you need to replace this? It can cost you less, but it doesn't make it less of a gamble.
It does not. See, and in no way am I going to undermine the capability that a few independent workshops possess in the country.
Sure, for sure.
They are absolutely skilled at what they do. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be a calculated risk, right? And because there are parts that can go wrong, parts that might not be readily available, right? You either A, have to resort to being reliant on the manufacturer again, please source this part for me, which again is going to be very exorbitant, or B, figure out how to import a part on your own, or C, have the independent workshop sort it out for you, right? All three are A, time consuming, B, stressful, C, not really light on the wallet, right? Because I'll give you another example. I remember coming across a listing of an S350 CDI for 3.5 lakh rupees. It was obviously a Delhi registered car, I think 15, 16 years old. Obviously too good to be true. The air suspension had obviously gone. And I remember going through the pictures and I saw the airbag warning light on. Now, on that particular generation, the airbag sensors, right, were notorious. And the bill cost probably to replace all of them, because there are 9 airbags, the bill to just replace all the airbag sensors and all the faults to be cleared would probably cost thrice as much as the car. Easy. And we're not even getting to the air suspension. Even if you swap it out to for normal steel springs, it is because it's an S class, right? There is a certain quality of springs that you would want to put in. Absolutely. Again, you're looking at a 6-digit expense, right? Buying these cars might be relatively easy, but trying and keeping them running in the Indian scenario, with the way parts are available slash not available, and with the expertise and finesse that is required to keep these cars running, is not an easy task.
And there's also the variable of what is it that you bought this car for in the first place. Yeah. Let's say you got into the decision to buy a new car in the first place with the idea that I need a daily commuter, I need something for road trips, I need something to be my only car. Buying a used luxury car in that context means that you are going to be very dependent and you have to make sure that the car is running right, which means you will have to take up these expenditures after a point, otherwise sell them for a loss. This is the reason why we see so many of these older Range Rovers, S-Classes, 7 Series lying flat on the roadside, because somebody bought them, got excited about it, and then realized that, oh my God, I did not believe it's possible for a car to cost this much to maintain. And that is where that big shock value comes in. And like we said, it's not so much about what you spend into regular services. As long as you have that mindset that, okay, fine, it's a luxury car, I expect it to cost this much to service. That is still manageable for most people, because still you're spending what, 10, 15, 20,000 more rupees per year for basic stuff like oil and oil filter. But then if you have a one-off incident where you ding the car, you have a small front end hit and that causes the radiator to come loose. That radiator is connected to some mount. That mount is connected to some wire. That wire is to some sensor. That little seed turns into a big tree very easily. And you can find yourself stuck in the middle of nowhere. And this is not to demotivate you from buying a luxury car. We're just telling you that the mathematics when it comes to these cars is very different to a mass market product. And that brand value is not all you're paying for. That brand can make you pay as well.
So the long and short of this discussion is that used luxury cars are very desirable, right? And I think people need to experience a luxury car at least once in their life, even if it is via this route. But the big caveat here is, know what you're getting into. A used luxury car will A, require time, B, it will require effort to keep up, C, it will require money to keep up. Even if you have one of these missing, do not bother wasting your time trying to get a luxury car at a bargain price. Right? We're not talking about cars that are still in warranty. We're not talking about cars that are maybe a year old, maybe 2 years old, run less, all of that. That is still perfectly fine, backed by factory warranty, all of that. But all of these deals, like Tushar said, that seem too good to be true, are probably just that.
Yeah, and with these luxury cars, as desirable as they are, it's very easy for your dream to turn into a nightmare if you don't do your research. So we're not saying no, but we are saying that the research you do for a new car, the research you do for a used mass market car, and the research you do for a used luxury car, these are three very independent discussions, and you need to be particular about how you go about it, and don't let your emotions let you get carried away when it comes to something this important. We are saying this because you've seen certain incidents that could be a little hair raising, and it's definitely not a space you want to get into if you aren't into cars yourself.
Sure. And that's the long and short of this discussion. If you've liked it, be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, all of that. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and send me money so I can buy a used Audi RS5. See you in the next one. Bye.